Hello all, welcome to the show. I'm Gus Gagliardi and this is Fire Code Tech. On Fire Code Tech, we interview fire protection professionals from all different careers and backgrounds in order to provide insight and a resource for those in the field. My goal is to help you become a more informed fire protection professional. Fire Code Tech has interviews with engineers and researchers, fire marshals, and insurance professionals, and highlights topics like codes and standards, engineering systems, professional development, and trending topics in the industry. So if you're someone who wants to know more about fire protection or the fascinating stories of those who are in the field, you're in the right place. Welcome to episode 4 of Fire Code Tech. Today we have Aaron Johnson. Aaron is a fire marshal who works in aviation and specializes in aircraft rescue firefighting. Aaron goes into detail about what aircraft rescue firefighting is and how it compares to conventional firefighting. We get to talk about fire investigations and high expansion foam nuisance discharges. We get to go over why aviation fire protection has some of the biggest and baddest fire protection systems. Aaron talks about his content creation as the code coach. On episode 4 of Fire Code Tech, we talk about Aaron's involvement with the 409 committee and why it's important to be active in your career. Also, we talk about how one would go about getting published in a magazine for fire protection. We also get to talk about one of Aaron's favorite fire protection projects. Don't forget to follow Fire Code Tech on social media and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Aaron. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, so just to start out, I wanted to give people a little bit of background on who you are and how you got into fire protection.
My name's Aaron. Like you said, I currently I provide. I'm the fire marshal for an aircraft manufacturing company, and I also do some consulting on a freelance basis on the side. But I kind of got into the business about 13, almost 14 years ago now. I started out as an EMT and with the goal of becoming a firefighter. And I went to fire school, and in fire academy there were two fields that really interested me, even more than the structural firefighting side. I was interested in the ARFF industry, which is aircraft rescue firefighting. So I knew that was a field I was going to work in. And then I was also really interested in the fire prevention side, inspections and public education and investigations and those kind of things. So I took those interests. I got certified as a firefighter, and then I started pursuing my actual first job out of the academy. Actually, was at an aircraft rescue department, which is where I am today. And so I took that job, and then for the next 2 years, I worked on everything I needed to become certified as a fire inspector in the state of Florida, which is where I'm at. And so I took the classes, became certified by the state, and then I went and worked for a local municipality for about 5 years. And then about 6 years ago now, the chief at the first department I worked for, he had called and asked me to come back and run their fire prevention program out there. So that's kind of how I got started and where I am now.
That's really interesting. Something that I wanted to touch on is it seems like from your activity in your writing and your activity in some of your educational materials that you have a lot of passion for the ARFF, which is aircraft. What is that again?
It's aircraft rescue firefighting, so we call it ARFF. It used to be called crash rescue, but people weren't so comfortable with that, so now we call it ARFF.
I see. Yeah. So, how does aircraft firefighting? How does that differ from your standard firefighting or your structure firefighting?
All right, so for ARFF departments or aircraft rescue fire departments, they're primarily on the site at whether it's an airport or in private industry. They're there for the aircraft, or if there's an aircraft crash or an incident, that's what they're primarily there for. Though they do have a lot of them respond to medical calls as well from the terminal and that kind of thing, and respond to the buildings. But they're primarily there for the aircraft, and usually the FAA drives as requirements. So if you want to be an indexed airport with passenger service, you have to have some sort of aircraft rescue fire protection. So that's what drives that. But the actual responding to an incident or fire, one big difference is that you have a lot of fuel, you're dealing with a different type of fuel load. In a home, you might have, plastics, paper products, that kind of thing. With an aircraft, you're dealing with large amounts of really jet fuel and that kind of thing. So you have a lot of running fuel 3D fires when the actual fire occurs. And then also in the structural side of things, which is more where I'm really focused at and work on, you're dealing with hangars and types of fire suppression systems and fire alarm systems they don't actually see a lot of times in the normal the normal community type of fire protection or fire inspection work. In the aircraft hangars, you're dealing with low or high foam suppression systems, high expansion foam or low expansion foam systems you don't see a lot of. And then you have some complex alarm systems and things like that as well. So that's a lot more, for me, that's more fun and more interesting for my daily work. But that's just some basic differences.
That sounds like you're getting to deal with some high challenge fires there. I mean, compared to class four commodities or, your run of the mill plastics, I think jet fuel has to rival anything that a normal structure could have to offer as far as fire load. So that's pretty interesting.
Yep, definitely.
Is there differences in how you would approach a structure fire from a hangar to your run of the mill office building? Are there, tactical differences in?
From a tactical consideration for the structure, it's probably pretty much going to be the same.
Mhm.
We pre-plan all of our structures so we know what they have and what's going on, and we try to, plan for possible incidents that could happen there. We conduct, a pretty thorough risk assessment of our facility that we're responsible for, which is pretty typical in the municipal firefighting world as well. And then, our initial response is always going to be the same. We want to make sure we protect life first, protect property second, and then prevent the incident from spreading third. So those priorities all remain the same.
I like to hear about that. My background is all behind the computer, so I've never been to a structure fire, or I obviously my whole job is as a fire protection designer is to prevent structure fires, and it's just like other fire protection designers, it's likely that I may never see a structure fire, even though I spend my whole life designing around these kind of scenarios. So, yeah, I always like to hear about the physical, real world application of it.
Yeah, no, out of 13 years of being in this business, I've only spent about 2 or 3 years in the operations side of it. And I spent the rest of my career in the prevention side. So I haven't seen a ton of actual fires either. I've been to several investigations. So kind of after the fire's done, kind of picking through it. I've done a lot of several system malfunction type of investigations. We've had a foam dump or something. Why did that happen? There's no fire. What was the cause of that? So those are always interesting too. But yeah, I spent most of my career in the prevention side.
Well, that's a great time to transition. I wanted to ask you if you had ever been involved in any investigations for fires or other types of explosions or events like that. Can you tell me about one of those times, or maybe a fire, or like you said before, nuisance discharge of a foam system? Yeah, those can be costly. I know from personal experience that you have aircrafts likely on the magnitude of millions to can be hundreds of millions of dollars worth of aircrafts in these hangars, and foam dumping on these planes can be extremely costly to everything in the hangar. So just maybe you could tell me a little bit more about your experience in investigation on the back half of things.
Fire investigations, like I said, I've done several of those, but I'm always more intrigued almost by the system activation, because they're not supposed to activate unless there's a fire, right? So it's like you have the system that's meant to do something it doesn't do. So I guess that's why I'm intrigued by, why did it do this thing that it's not supposed to do, that everybody kind of worries about it doing. They're interesting to first of all find out, go to scene, hey, find out what happened. Here's what happened, and then it's interesting to kind of play it backwards. Say, all right, well, for the system to have dumped its contents, what would have had to happen for that to take place? And then you realize, oh, okay, you trace it back. It could have been maybe it was a solenoid. Maybe first you have to rule out all the things that it wasn't. Well, there's no one in the hangar at the time, so nobody pulled the pull station accidentally. Isn't not saying that they did. So no one pulled the pull station. There was no fire for sure, right? You look around for evidence of that, so you can rule those two things out. Maybe it's the weather. I know we've had a couple where a lightning strike actually set off maybe some alarm systems or things like that. One hangar I investigated, the system had dumped. It turned out that it was in the middle of a bad tropical storm, force wind type of storm. What had actually happened is the foam release pull station had gotten water down inside the back of it, and it had shorted out and caused the solenoid to open, which caused the system to dump. That was an interesting one. Just stuff like that, looking for that, what is that thing? Because you see things that every investigation is different, and every time you do one, you realize something else that could have happened. You might have done 10 investigations, and that 11th one is something completely different than all the other 10. I'm really involved in the codes and standards side of the thing. I sit on several committees, and I like doing that work. I always tell people that's the most important part of the job, is even more than the enforcement, is being in that process where you write and develop these. So getting to these investigations, finding, hey, here's what's happening, that really can inform a lot of that code development process. NFPA 49, the standard for aircraft hangars, they're in a revision cycle right now. The big conversation was about, the insurance companies are saying, hey, we're not seeing any hangar fires, but we're seeing a lot of these foam dumps that are costing us lots of money. So what can we do to change that or address this issue? And so a lot of changes are coming out to actually address that, to say, hey, maybe we don't need foam in as many hangars as we think we do, or as the code currently requires. So what can we do to not, without creating a greater risk, what can we do to still mitigate the risk, but maybe also cut down those costs on those activations and that foam damage?
That's a lot of good points there. Touched on a couple things that I'd like to expand upon. First off, yeah, I mean, as far as fire investigations, I think it's so interesting. You'd think that in a time like today, 2020, where we have systems that are digital and will log record of all the events during a fire or a fire alarm activation, you'd think it'd be clear cut what caused these system activations or these nuisance foam dumps. But the reality of the situation is a lot of times the line is a lot more blurry than that in determining how these systems activated when they weren't supposed to. So, yeah, I resonate with what you said about ruling out all the factors, going back through a video of who was there and what was happening in the hangar. So, there's a lot of different ways that you can ferret out what happened or what didn't happen. So I like what you said about that.
Yeah, and then sometimes, these investigations, you find out that they actually did what they were supposed to do. I mean, it was just maybe someone didn't even know what they were doing, actually set it off. Like, I know, for example, we had one system that dumped. It was they were like a CAFS type of system, compressed air foam system, kind of like a mobile type of unit, and they had a flame detector that would make them operate. And one of those discharged. We were trying to go into the investigative process, and we turned out that, it was somebody across the airfield was welding on something, without that welding spark caught a reflection inside the hangar, and it caused that to go off. So the system actually didn't malfunction. It worked as it was supposed to. It just wasn't under the right context, I guess you'd say. So those are interesting too, because it's not like a bad system. I can't believe this thing did this. It's no, the system actually did what it was supposed to do. It thought it saw a fire, which it did. It just wasn't right there.
That's interesting. And, I have some experience with flame detectors and, depending on the brand or, the complexity of the flame detector, a lot of flame detectors are notorious for nuisance alarms. And, if you talk to any of the manufacturers for flame detectors, that's the number one thing that they are trying to say that their detector does not have. But it's kind of interesting. They're not all flame detectors are not made equal. And so there's a large gradient of, on your Cadillac version of your flame detector versus, the cheapest that you could get a flame detector, so that plays a part in it. And I didn't have any knowledge of that before I got into aviation fire protection. And, there's quite a range there. So I always thought that was interesting. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is you mentioned committees that you sit on or that you're a part of. I've heard from different people who I've talked to that it's of great value to be a part of these committees for different codes and standards, and 409 is a huge one. Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about some of the committees you're involved with, or what that looks like?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I preach it to my people at my department, and pretty much anytime someone will listen, that it's really the most important thing that you can do for the industry, and it's also not in a selfish way, but also for your career as a whole. I mean, it's good for the industry because you're contributing to it. You're actually if you're on the ground, you're seeing what goes on from whatever perspective, whether you're an engineer, a designer, a firefighter, or an inspector. You're seeing a different perspective of how this code's applied, and being on those committees and being able to, or not even if you're not on the committee, you can still provide input. So providing those inputs and taking part in that process, it goes a long way, and it makes a big difference. And it's very important, and it's great for your professional development, I guess I should say, rather than for your career, but for your professional development as well. You go to these meetings and you're with some of the people that they've been doing this for a long time, and there's a wealth of knowledge on these committees. It's like a great, they pull all the knowledge on this subject is all sitting in this one room. And so you get to it's a great learning experience as well to learn from and talk to these people. Yeah, I mean, so with the NFPA and the ICC, they have kind of a different process. And I'm a little bit more involved with the NFPA side. They have more more committees and more codes and standards and things like that that require committee work. So I'm on several committees, but I'm primarily involved with the aircraft facilities committee, which is 409, 415, and 423, and also the ARF operations committees as well, which that includes things like NFPA 402 and all the operational sides of the aircraft rescue industry, all the codes that apply to that.
Yeah, I was looking at some of your work, some of your writing work, and you know, I'm well familiar with 409, but I am a lot less familiar with the other aircraft firefighting and other 400 series aircraft NFPAs. It's wild that there are so many NFPAs, and there's so much good content, but it's hard for any one person to be knowledgeable in all of them. There's just too many to wrap your arms around. But I'm not even really aware of 415 or 423 or some of the other ones you listed. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's incredible.
And it's neat too as a kind of a point of education to be able to explain to the public or to your customer, why that code was put into place. Why is it, because well, I don't understand why I have to do that, or why does that matter? And you could kind of from being in those committee meetings, listen to the conversations, and being able to kind of trace the history of that code and that code change. It's neat to be able to educate and say, well, here's what we had. Here's how we got to this point. And that's what I tell people too. Like, you with the NFPA, you have to, there's an application process to be a committee member, but you don't have to be a member. You can go as a guest and just still take part in the process. So I always tell people to, if you're not sure about committee membership or being part of a committee, but you're interested in the topic, you can RSVP as a guest and show up at a meeting, and it doesn't cost you anything. You go there and sit and learn, and even as a guest, you're able to ask questions and those kind of things. So
I never knew about that. That's good information for everybody who's a fire protection professional. Wasn't aware that that was even a possibility. Yeah, I haven't ever applied for any committees, but after I've spoken with some of the people through Fire Code Tech, I'm like, man, I need to get on that. I need to get involved in. I have been involved with some professional societies and whatnot, but it seems like joining a committee, whether it be for ICC or NFPA, SFPE, or even there's some good committees around other fire protection certifications. It seems like that there is a lot of benefit to be gained and to contribute to these committees. So, yeah, that's really interesting.
in the ICC, they have what they call a code action committee. So they have fire code action committees, which is again, there are members of that committee. You can go as a guest to those as well. There's a fire code action committee and a building code action committee, and they kind of are groups of professionals that are they're going to create code proposals and code changes to bring to the code hearing. So the process looks a little bit different, but it's still you still have the same opportunity to get involved and provide input and to gain professional development and knowledge from the people that are in those rooms as well through the ICC process.
It seems like that the ICC code committees are the most coveted or the most hard to get into. Seems like from the people who I've talked to, those chairs are the most sought after because, at the end of the day, if it's not code, it's not enforceable by law, or, if it's not even tangentially related to law or code, if it's not a reference standard, then it's really hard to make it stick.
For sure. I mean, so the NFPA has over 300 codes and standards, and some of those codes and standards have multiple committees that make up just that one standard. Like, for example, NFPA 101 has several different committees. So there's a lot more opportunities, and they need a lot, there's a greater need for more bodies to kind of contribute to that process. And, I think the other thing too is that the ICC, they have the International Building Code, which is used in probably all 50 states, whereas, NFPA, they have an NFPA 5000, which is their version of the building code, but it's not, I don't think it's used in any state. So, you have a lot more reach and less seats with the ICC and, a lot more seats with the NFPA, but
For sure, yeah. Another thing that you spoke about before is, the need of foam. And it's not uncommon that I get in a conversation with customers and even with engineers where they ask, why do we need foam? Why can't we just use water? How common is a hangar fire? And like you said, There's a lot more nuisance foam dumps than hangar fires. Yeah, I think it was an interesting point, and especially with the Department of Defense, and they just released their budget, basically saying that they don't want any more AFFF, and their DoD is moving towards fluorine-free foam and that whole mess. So yeah, I didn't know if you had any more thoughts on foam and just where the industry is going with that.
I mean, kind of to on the tail of what you were just saying. I mean, that's the biggest thing right now. The biggest change or the trending topic is PFAS and PFOA free foams and making sure they're not carcinogenic and they're safe for people and the environment. So that's the big thing kind of in the industry. And if you think about the reason that we require foam in hangars, anyways, is for the risk or hazard of large fuel spills and large fuel fires. And the industry at large isn't really seeing a huge number of those, and sometimes your hangar size can only house a certain size of an aircraft anyway, no matter what. And you're not going to have you're not going to have that risk of a large fuel spill, and a fuel spill ignition isn't going to be as great. So I think those are the changes we're seeing and happening. So I think it's a combination of both of those. A lack of seeing the large fuel spill fires and also wanting to go to that, the carcinogenic free and environmentally friendly type of foam type of product as well.
Definitely, I see that. Yeah, it's causing a lot of strain now for, firms like my firm where, there's a lot of people don't know trying to get fluorine foams listed with different discharge devices. Oh, so we have a fluorine free foam, but it's not listed with all of the high expansion foam generators, and it's not listed for these discharge devices. So I feel like it's a huge race to not get not only the foam UL listed, but get the foam's interaction with the discharge device listed and ready to go. Because I mean, essentially almost nobody is going to touch, a foam product or a foam generator combination that's not listed, UL listed or FM approved. So, yeah, it's an interesting time in the fire protection industry right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to hear a little bit more about your time as an inspector. Can you take me through what a day as an inspector would look like, or what that job is kind of like?
Yeah, so obviously it varies based on what jurisdiction you work within or what industry you're in. But as a municipal inspector, I had the opportunity to work at a smaller department in a smaller jurisdiction. So that gave me the opportunity to be involved in all facets of the fire prevention field. So I was responsible for fire plans review. I'd go and inspect the same things I reviewed. I would do investigations when they came up and happened as they happened, and then also public education was on my plate as well. So it was a great opportunity, especially when I was new in my career, to be able to put my hands on all of those things and be able to kind of work in all different industries, all different occupancy types, and all the way from in water supply, undergrounds, all those kind of things, all different systems, all the way from the plan review part all the way to the final inspection and acceptance test, and doing some, then you go back a few years later, do the existing building inspections, and see what might have changed, what might be different. So that was a great opportunity. And I know some larger jurisdictions inspectors might not have that opportunity. If you're assigned to plan review, then that's all you do is plan review, and you might not ever be able to go out and see the actual completed product. Or you might just be in public education. That's all you do too, which those are all those are great fields. There's not a problem with any of them, but it was really good to be able to have the opportunity for me to be able to put my hands on all of those things. And that kind of, set me up for success and career field where I moved to right now. And now as kind of the fire marshal, kind of leading the programs. I again get to keep my hand in all of that, but I'm in private industry. It's a little bit different. I spend a lot of my time more developing standards and policies and procedures, making sure we're in compliance with all the different, maybe it's a government contract or FM Global insurance provider requirements, company policies. And then, I also get that time to kind of look at the industry at large and say, hey, what's coming up, and being involved in that code and standards process that takes some time as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a great field to be in. There's lots of opportunities for what you like to do. I know you kind of mentioned a little bit, but I got involved kind of in the blogging and writing and content development about 10, probably about 11 years ago now. And you wouldn't think maybe the fire protection field is something where you get to use that creative part of your brain, but you definitely do. And so that's what's great about the field. There's so many opportunities to kind of implement the things you enjoy.
I really resonate with that sentiment. There's so much room in fire protection for people who are passionate and so much opportunity. I wish I could encourage more people getting into, just coming out of high school or, getting into their professional career that, how much the fire protection field has to offer because it's like you said for you, and it has been for me too. It's been very rewarding and a lot of opportunity, and just so good as far as development and opportunity. But yeah, I'd like to get into your writing. It seems like you're quite a prolific writer, and you have so much good content online for fire protection and aircraft firefighting and different training and education materials. So that's pretty incredible. It's You don't see that too often for fire protection professionals. So yeah, that'd be great if you could talk about that a little bit more and share about your fire protection content creation.
Yeah, yeah, no, it sounds good. So I got started. I started with a little blog, thecodecoach.com. It's still online, and I started about 10 years ago. And it kind of came about because as I was doing those plan reviews and inspection, I'd see something I'd have a question about. And so I'd sit at my desk and find the answer. Then I started thinking, oh, you know what? Somebody else might have the same question. So I'd write a little thing up about it. So that's kind of how it evolved. And then through time, through that, I realized that it was a great tool to be able to contact people from all over the world about fire protection issues or problems or concerns or things you're seeing. So I started being enabled to that kind of put me out there and maybe able to enable me to contact other people in the industry. So that was a great tool and experience. So I continued doing that, and then probably about 3 years into it, I wanted to get more serious with it, and so I started blogging almost every day. Then I went down to about every week, and then I was pretty consistent for the next few years, putting a post out every 1 to 2 weeks. And so from being out there, that kind of led to something else which I'd wanted to do, which was consulting type of work. And so that attracted the view of a couple initial clients that got me involved in doing code and standards consulting for them. And then I enjoy writing, so I started writing other content as well. I did some long form content, I wanted to try some books and publishing. So I did that. I guess my therapist would say maybe a little bit of an egomaniac, right? So I like to see myself in print. So I said, oh, I could probably get into a couple magazines or something for the fun of it. So I did that, and that's kind of where it is. And from that, people see your name and ask you to help them with stuff. And that's what I like to do. I like to help people with their problems, especially if it's related to fire protection. So I started getting more clients that wanted me to write content for them, and then some clients as well that wanted me to do some codes and standards research and development as well. So I kind of took off from there. There's a lot of people have a lot of knowledge and not a lot of knowledge to share, and some people look at maybe getting published in a magazine or something as like a big challenge. But the truth is, especially with the trade publications in your industry, no matter what it is, mine's fire protection, but maybe if it's plumbing or whatever it might be, the truth is that those publications are looking for people that can provide content and can write, and sometimes you don't have to be a great writer because you're going to be edited and work with somebody. So that's always a good thing too. So I always like to encourage people to, reach out to those editors or those publications and tell them your idea, and the chances are better that they'll work with you and want to take your project on than not.
That's infinitely interesting to me. Yeah, it's almost like you read my mind because I was going to ask how you go about, contacting one of these magazines or scholarly publications for how to get published and how to get involved with that. It seems like a daunting task. Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of writing and blogging, but I'm not the strongest rider. So that's really interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just, and it takes work. So your first thing you write isn't going to be very good, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. I think it was Ernest Hemingway who said, "The first draft of anything is shit." So that was coming from a pretty well known writer. So you always have that solace.
I like that. That's good. So say that you approach one of the places that you've been published in, and so you say that through the editor or through they may have a call to writers for different publications, or yeah, what does that look like when you are going to start that process of being published in a magazine?
Yeah, so there's a few ways. There are, if you, the first thing I would do is find the publication that I would want to be published in or that pertains to my industry and go to that website. And on that website, you want to look for a couple things. You want to see if they have a special spot where you can, like a call for submissions or, submit your proposal, your article here. And then you kind of go to that page. Usually it explains what they want you to do. And the important thing about that is following those instructions. If they realize that you follow instructions, and they're going to think, oh, this is someone we can work with. But if you submit something that doesn't meet their format or isn't what they're looking for, then they're going to, obviously you're not going to get published because they're going to see that, you're not going to be able to, you can't follow directions and they're not going to be able to work with you. So if they don't have that on the website, then the second thing to do is to find the editor of the publication and find out who that editor is. I love LinkedIn. That's primary social media I'm on, but look them up on LinkedIn, find out a little bit about them and what they're doing and who they are a little bit. Then reach out to them via email, send them an email, and then send them a proposal of your idea. Tell them a little bit. Your proposal should, you kind of want it to grab them from the first couple sentences of the email. So kind of hit them with the big point, and then maybe break it down a little bit. Tell them, hey, how are you going to get to that main point, and then always tell them about who you are and why you're the guy to write the article. But that's pretty much it.
That's good. You broke it down in clear and concise steps. That's great. That's good information for anybody who's interested in being published, I think. You talked a little bit about your consulting work, and it sounds like your consulting and your career as a writer for technical publications kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your consulting work or your code consulting work, if you wouldn't mind going into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So I kind of like to. I'm not the type of personality that can go and just sit at a job for 30 years and just do that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not my personality. I get kind of antsy a little bit. So I always like to, again, my fire marshal job is my day job, and I love it and enjoy it. But it's always nice to. I would like to have 2 or 3 clients also that require other work and other challenges out of me, and also my own projects going on. So I started taking them on, and usually they find me based on whatever their needs are. So I've worked in different industries, done a lot in the fire stopping and compartmentation type of industry, some fire rated glazing work, the sprinkler industry as well. So a lot of the consulting type of work is based on codes and standards development, right? We want people to, they're looking for a consultant who can monitor code changes, right? Because the guy that makes, let's just say fire rated glass, he knows everything about making glass, but he might not know everything about the code processes of NFPA or ICC or ASTM or UL. So he needs an expert that's going to follow those codes for him, say, hey, what's going on, and kind of protect his interests and look out for his interests in the industry. Or maybe that glass guy has a new product he wants to bring to market. Well, what are the codes and standards that are going to prevent that from happening? Or what kind of formula might you have to use to make sure that gets approved? So they're going to look for an expert that understands the codes and standards and can monitor them, first of all, but can also write proposals and kind of advocate for them on the different committees and then the different codes that affect their business. So that's kind of the consulting part. And then the other thing I do is the content development. Again, people want content nowadays, especially with online, and that's how you get noticed in business, is being online and getting the more content you have, the more likely the algorithms are going to find you and put your site and your information to the top. So content's kind of king, and so I write content and focused on the fire protection side of things.
Very interesting. So it sounds like you not only have to be aware of codes and standards, but also testing and different mechanisms to where people require listing and a whole myriad of other different parts of fire protection because if somebody wants your help with their glazing product or whatever product it may be, you have to be knowledgeable about not just the codes and standards, but how they might need to meet the code and what tests they might need to conduct to be compliant.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so we've touched a little bit about some of these professional development topics, but yeah, I just wanted to ask, do you have in your mind, are there any emerging trends in your field as a fire marshal or just as a fire protection code consultant or professional?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I guess that have caught my attention in the last probably over the last year or so that I've kind of been paying attention to. One is the in fire extinguishers. So there's a company out there called Russo, Rusoh, and they have a product called the Eliminator. And what that is, it's a self-service fire extinguisher. So basically, the extinguisher industry now works as you have your metal extinguisher on the wall, and it has to be serviced every year. So a technician comes out and services it every few years. It has to be hydrostatically tested based on what type it is, and that metal can have different things go wrong with it. Right, it can get corrosion, damage, dented, whatever. But this company called Russo, I actually had an opportunity to talk to the creator of the product and stuff, and he's a really neat idea. It's a neat company, he's a neat guy. They created an extinguisher that it doesn't require any annual service, and a business owner can basically do a monthly inspection on it himself, and you don't have to know anything about extinguishers or how they work. The Russo company actually has a little training thing on their site to show you how to do it, but anybody can service this extinguisher, and every 10 years you replace it. It's made of some kind of poly, like a plastic, so it's not subject to like corrosion or anything like that. But that's a really neat product. I think that's something that's going to change that the extinguisher industry, which probably hasn't had any earth-shattering changes in quite a long time. But I definitely would encourage you to check that out. It's the Russo Eliminator, Rusoh. So that's pretty cool. And then yeah, and you can save a lot. Save a lot for big companies that have 300, 400, 1,000 or more extinguishers. You're going to save a lot of money on service work and even on replacements. So we did like a quick kind of back of the napkin type of analysis for one of our sites, and it was going to save about $40,000 over 3 years just in paying the service technician that we would come out to service that every year. So that's quite a bit of savings, and that's on only about 200 extinguishers. So, but definitely worth checking out. The other thing, and I don't know a lot about this product yet, but I've been hearing some about it, is the electronically activated sprinkler. I don't know if you've seen those or not, but that seems like it's going to be a game changer. I know Tyco has one. I don't know who else manufactures it, but that seems like it's something definitely to watch in the industry. And then I think the last thing I would say is, I know within the kind of brings all the industries together, brings together your AHJs, your municipalities, your fire inspectors, and it brings together your building owners and your sprinkler and fire alarm technicians. Is third party reporting. Probably started coming out about 5 years ago or so. And so what third party reporting does, it's software that kind of connects those three industries together. And what it really does for the fire department is it helps in their risk reduction efforts, right? They don't have to go out to every occupancy. Now those occupancies are submitting the reports on a cloud system or a web-based system that an inspector can just log on and say, okay, this company's compliant. I don't need to go out there and hound them about their fire sprinkler inspection, or they can get notified of only the major deficiencies. Now I say, okay, so I don't need to go out to these ones; they're fine, but this one has a major deficiency to go check out. So I think that's definitely an important thing in the industry as well. It's third party reporting. There's several different companies that are doing that, but I think it's a big thing that's going to help communities be more safe.
On the I feel like I've seen something about the eliminator on social media, but I could be wrong. But that sounds like an interesting product. So it's just like the way that it's constructed makes it easier for people to be able to inspect, or yeah, I don't fully understand what part of it.
So it's like the powder inside the extinguisher has to be fluffed occasionally, so it won't work. It won't activate properly. So there's like a little wheel on the bottom of the extinguisher you can turn that fluffs it. So that part of the monthly inspection that the owner can do is just go through and turn that wheel half a turn and it fluffs the powder. It's also cartridge operated, so the canister itself isn't always under pressure like a normal extinguisher might be. So it's only under pressure when you need to use it. So that also, so it doesn't have to be hydrostatically tested every so often anymore. And then the components themselves, for example, if you discharge the extinguisher, you have a fire, you discharge the extinguisher, you pay 40 or $50 and they send you a refill kit that includes the agent, a new seals, and a new CO2 cartridge. So whereas before you'd have to call a company to come out and service that or buy a whole new unit, this company's made it to where you just buy the parts you need.
That seems like a good innovation. Fire extinguishers, you get into situations in military applications where they don't even want the fire extinguishers because of how much of a hassle it is to keep them around. And, I was having a conversation the other day. How many people really know how to use a fire extinguisher? So, if there was a fire situation, would you really want a layperson, engaging in trying to fight a fire that could be bigger than a trash can or sizable? Is that the situation that you really want people to be who don't have experience in fire protection, fighting this fire? So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, primarily the fire department, they just want you to get out of the building. So that's the main thing. We want you to get out. We don't want you really sitting there trying to be a firefighter. And I think that comes with education, right? You educating your public or your customer. Hey, listen, we want you to get out. That's the main thing. But if it's something you think you can handle and you're in the right position, you're in a safe spot for that, and your exit's clear, it's a small garbage can fire, then yeah, it might be better to use extinguisher if you can. That way we don't have a water mess to clean up. But if not, the important things that you get out and
For sure. Yeah. Another thing, the two things that you mentioned had a lot to do with ITM being reduced or made easier. But well, that one was through the physical operation of the device, but the other one was about reporting. And something that I've seen recently is fire alarm notification devices that have the ability to test themselves. Due to the operation, I forget which company specifically has them, but I think that in the future, ease of maintenance and testing through technology and through just electronic convenience is going to be a big deal for our industry. And do these pressure gauges and these valves really get checked at the frequencies that our code required? In the commercial world, oftentimes sadly that's not the case. But yeah, I definitely think that we're going to see a lot of change in the next 10 years in remote testing and that sort of thing. So I thought that was interesting.
yeah, definitely. No, I think it's a good time to be in this industry. So.
Other thing is, I didn't really understand. So, what is third party reporting? I'm not really aware of what that is.
So third party reporting is like so I actually represent a company because I thought it was such a great idea. They're called Inspection Reports Online. So I represent them in the state of Florida, but they provide. So what third party reporting is? So iRoll Inspection Report Online is its own company, right? So that's like the third party. So if you have a jurisdiction like a fire department, they will say, all right, we want all of our contractors that are doing system inspections. When they do it, they go out to business, they do an inspection on the sprinkler system. Well, they submit their report to the third party, which would maybe Inspection Reports Online. That way, and then what Inspection Reports Online can do, they can communicate between the building owner, the contractor, and the fire department on the status of that system, that inspection, when it's due. And so what the third party a lot of times does is it takes away the time that would be spent by an inspector that would have to kind of maybe try to coordinate or get that building owner to take action. So the third party can look at that inspection and say, okay, this building owner they need a new flow switch they need to change some sprinkler heads out. So the third party can actually coordinate that and kind of work between the contractor and the building owner, make sure that gets done. And then they can actually clear that inspection so that when the fire department logs on, they say, oh, they had an issue with their sprinkler system. The building owner took care of it. So I don't have to worry about that building because now they have a clear inspection report. So it kind of what it does is it frees up your fire departments to let them do other things that are important, because one of the biggest things in the fire service, especially fire prevention bureaus, is staffing. So you have limited people, limited manpower and resources. So that third party reporting kind of in a lot of ways it acts as a almost another employee because you have that company taking care of that part for you. And a lot of these companies, I know for iRoll and I'm sure some of the other providers as well, the cost for that service doesn't go to the fire department, but it just gets passed on and it's minimal. It gets passed on to the contractor and they just add it to their service charge or whatever.
Seems like a clean way to go about it. And if you're really above board and are keeping up with all of your maintenance needs like every owner should be, then sounds like a good solution.
Yeah, and then the fire department says, "Well, I don't need to go to that business every year. I can maybe only go every 2 or 3 years because I can see that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Their reports are here. They're always on time with their inspections, and so that third party kind of helps to again, it's decreasing the risk in your community, the fire risk or loss of life to your community by maintaining that and tracking that and making sure this can get done. And also, it helps by whenever a major deficiency occurs, well, in the past, you might have to wait for that contractor to send the report to the fire department or to notify them somehow, or did they get notified? You don't know. But if there's a major deficiency, then as soon as they submit it to that third party, like they're supposed to, in a lot of states or counties or cities will do that through legislation that will make it part of their local ordinance that you have to use this software and you have to submit it within such an amount of time, 24 hours or whatever it might be. So now what that will do through technology and the internet and email, as soon as you get one of those major deficiencies, then it automatically will alert whoever the fire department needs for it to alert, and then an inspector can immediately go out and follow up on that and make sure that the proper action is taken. So there's a lot of opportunities with it and a lot of benefits to the community as a whole, but also for fire departments, even giving them more time to focus on only the things they need to focus on, and it's a big thing for our industry.
For sure. That sounds very interesting. It sounds like it has a lot of promise. I think we're at, the uptick of, I feel like fire protection is a little bit behind in regards to technology or just in general. But I feel like in the next 5, 10 years, we're going to see a lot of these things become commonplace. So yeah, and about the electronic sprinklers, yeah, I guess I'm really interested by them, but I don't know. Yeah, I guess maybe I'm being a little bit curmudgeony about like not knowing about them and questioning, as I'm sure a lot of people are impact of them, or my view as an engineer is, as much as I love designing the high expansion foam or the AFFF or systems, most of the time my job is specifying the most cost efficient, safest, most reliable system that I can, whenever I can, which is generally a wet pipe fire suppression system. So yeah, I just don't know how that plays in. Electronic sprinklers play into that scenario yet. I guess I'm just not real informed.
Yeah, no, I don't know a lot about them either. I just I've read a little bit and listened to a couple podcasts about them, but I don't know. I've never really had any hands-on experience. I guess from the AHJ fire marshal side, I guess my initial thought is it seems like an extra piece of the system that could fail when needed, but I'm sure that's all vetted. They're all UL listed in that anyway, but that's just my initial thing. Would be my initial thought. And like I said, the cost. I mean, now you have it looks like each head or series of heads has to have a heat detector attached to it. So
Yeah, that's significant. Considering each one of those heat detectors is $300 to $400 a pop. So you're saying, oh, in addition to your, $3 to $20 a sprinkler head, you also got to have these detectors. I don't care about it, but I work with a lot of architects and interior designers that would be like, why do we have even more of these ugly looking fire protection devices all over the place? So yeah, I don't care if it works and like to install it and be a part of a system like that, but I could see an owner, an architect, or a interior designer being like, "What are you trying to do here with all these extra ceiling devices?" So yeah, that's kind of an interesting thought.
yeah, and maybe like I said, I haven't done a lot of research and so I don't really have any hands-on experience, but it probably would be cost effective in some type of high value properties. It might be even more cost effective than a pre-action system. I don't know, but probably depends on the application. But no, I think it's definitely a neat innovation and something kind of cool in the industry.
Definitely. On the topic of professional development, you've given a lot of great pieces of advice so far in this podcast about committees and about content creation and about just for young professionals or just professionals in general. But yeah, I just wanted to ask, what a piece of advice would you have for young professionals or for people getting into the fire protection industry?
Well, I mean, I always recommend to read. Reading is good, no matter what you're reading. Most people don't like to read, but it's definitely a great way to enhance your knowledge, especially in if you're reading something specifically related to fire protection. I always tell people, if even if you hate reading, and you can at least read maybe take that big book or that magazine and read one chapter per day if that's all it takes to get you through it and say, I read my chapter a day and move on. But you're definitely going to gain something from that. So definitely read. And I do tell people to, to get involved in an organization, whether that be a local organization like maybe a fire marshals association or a fire chiefs association or a local chapter of like an ICC or an SFPE, but get involved and talk to people, because that's how you're going to learn, and you'll need someone to go to when you have a question. And so that those are always good. And I go back to LinkedIn. I like being on LinkedIn and building relationships with people in the field, because those are also are part of my network, no matter where they're at, locally or far away, if I've met them or not. And get part of groups on LinkedIn. You can just put a question out there, within minutes or sometimes seconds, you have a bunch of different responses and places to look and go to for information. So read, meet people in the industry, and go on LinkedIn and join some of those groups.
That's great advice. Yeah, I think that learning and building connections is always sound advice. Each time I talk to professionals, it seems like the number one piece of advice I get is, you know, read your codes, read your standards, be involved. It's something that's so hard to do, and a lot of people resist it or don't want to do it, but it's the number one way you're going to become an expert is by just being extremely knowledgeable about the layout, how the codes and standards are developed or implemented. And so that's a great piece of advice. Yeah, I think reading is never a bad idea. And see, I always go back and try to tell people, young professionals, it may be tempting to, pick the job with the biggest dollar amount attached to it, but what's equally as important as how much money you're making is what kind of professional development you're getting and what kind of mentor you're working with. So I think that plays into your building connections and being involved with the community, because that is a very rich way to build knowledge and to you don't have to know everything if you are able to have people in your life that are experts as well. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I remember some of those days just kind of starting out. Like that's what I would do. I would take a section of the code. The code book's kind of thick, but if you take a section at a time, and each day you're saying, hey, you learn a little bit about something else. You might not know everything about flammable liquids, but today you might read a little section on flammable liquids cabinets, and so you read a few paragraphs and you learn something even doing that. And like I said, I love to read. I read almost everything, but even reading fiction, it helps because it activates a creative part of your brain. So if you can have that activated, then when you are faced with fire protection problems, that creative part of your brain has been activated, kind of an exercise. So even that helps.
Yeah, I love that. I love to read, and I think that's good for people. It's becoming something that's kind of lost. It seems like content today is becoming shorter and shorter and more bite sized and, just kind of crunched down. But yeah, I think that the future of working in general is going to be people who have the attention span and the capacity to work in the long form and produce content in the long form. So, yeah, I agree with that. One question I had for you is, can you tell me about a job that you had or a project that you had was particularly challenging, or maybe one that you just found personally interesting?
Yeah. So when I was there's several, but I know like there's one when I was a municipal inspector for my local County, they revamped the museum, and so the museum actually has a huge Model T collection, and so it was the first time that I got to see these. It's like a display and parking carriage, carousel. So basically, there's a movable arm that would come and pull these cars out of their location and bring it up to like a window where you could see it. So you can see all the cars in there. But if the museum visitor presses a button and wants to see a certain car, well, this carousel will come and we'll bring that car around to the window, and you can spin that car around and look at it. So that was kind of a neat new thing that I had seen back then. And also that building was also the first time that I got to really get into dealing with pre-action sprinkler systems, because we don't really have a lot of those down here in my area. But it was my first time to get to be involved with those, and reviewing the plans for that and conducting the acceptance tests and all that kind of stuff. So it's always something that I remember.
That's really neat. It's always fun when you get to fire protection is such a neat field because fire protection touches pretty much every structure in some capacity. So it's fun to be involved and get to experience the breadth of all the different systems and devices and facilities that FP touches. So that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Aaron, I want to thank you for your time and thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it. I think I've learned a lot of stuff just through talking to you. So yeah, I just want to thank you.
Yeah, for sure. No problem. Thank you for having me. And I'm always up for opportunities to talk with somebody that enjoys talking about fire protection stuff. It's not too many people enjoy that.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah, I definitely had talked my fiance's ear off about fire protection, and she doesn't even want to hear that business. So anytime I can get a chance to talk to somebody about it, I'm all about it.
I've bored my fair share of dinner guests. So
Alrighty, well, thanks again. Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to share the episode with a friend if you enjoyed it. Don't forget that fire protection and life safety is serious business. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are by no means a professional consultation or a codes and standards interpretation. Be sure to contact a licensed professional if you are getting involved with fire protection and or life safety. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.